first off, we're just going to start talking about the Arab Spring. So the Arab Spring is a fairly recent occurrence. However, I feel as if, especially in this community, little is known about it. Could you start off by explaining what the Arab Spring is and how Yemen was affected?
Well, I think in 2011, the Arab Spring was seen very differently than it's seen today. In 2011, it was seen as an incredible time for change in the region, a new start, bringing down the dictatorships that have been in control of countries for, tens of years. It started in Tunisia and then it spread across to Egypt, to Libya, and then to Yemen. In Yemen, it was about bringing down the president that has ruled for over 30 years, Ali Abdullah Saleh. And it wasn't a very violent revolution, which I think we're all very grateful for. There was one violent attack in the uprising. But other than that, it was a peaceful revolution. The president stepped down in February 2012, and then there was a transitional process where all the leading people in Yemen and many people from within the society and across the country came together for what was called the National Dialogue Congress, the National Dialogue Process, which brought along a lot of people from different backgrounds. And even President Obama said that it was an example of a very good transitional process. But unfortunately, while all these politicians and people were discussing the new constitution in a very lavish hotel in the capital city, Sana'a, they weren't focused on the economy. And so, for ordinary civilians, this had a huge impact on their livelihoods. It meant that fuel became really expensive, food became really expensive. And so they were getting really frustrated with the government not addressing their everyday needs. And so I think it was that frustration that led to the war that has been ravaging Yemen for the last 5 years.
Okay, I read that you started working on journalism on your own and you went to report in the Yemen. Mm-hmm. What influenced you to go do that?
Well, at the time I had just been, I was in the UK, I just finished university and I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to work in film, but I couldn't figure out what my story was. And so I decided to go back to Yemen to learn Arabic. And that's when I came across I didn't come across the Arab Spring, it was happening. But I was trying to figure out what story I could work on to make a film about. And then I noticed that there was a huge generational divide between older people in Yemen and younger people, and that in the Arab Spring the revolutions were mainly led by the younger generation. The older generation were very kind of stuck in their ways and they were afraid of change, and they felt like if the president was toppled, what was to come would be a lot worse than what was already happening. Whereas the younger people felt like he'd been ruling for too long, 30 years was way too long, and it was time for someone new. So I decided to make a film about a father and a son. The father didn't want the president to go, and the son was leading the protests, and that was my first ever documentary. And so Yemen was an incredible place. I was so lucky that I'm originally Yemeni, so I had somewhere to stay. But it was great to learn about a different culture, speak to different people, and to just go out of my comfort zone.
All right. And then obviously you transitioned to working with the BBC, just a massive step. Do you feel as if you can reach a wider audience through working with the BBC?
Yes, I think I'm really lucky that I get to work with the BBC. I think, the power of an institution like that, you can't even, put into words. But being able to work on a story and have someone in Korea watch it and email you about it, and have someone from Geneva watch it, it goes across the world. And being able to raise awareness on that scale is incredible, but it's also a great responsibility to make sure that every single word that you say and every single bit in your piece is impartial, is accurate, is factual. And so it is a lot of pressure, but it's incredible. It's a dream come true.
Yeah, that was just what I was about to ask. Do you feel like there's a limit sometimes to what you can and cannot say when working with such a large corporation?
I don't think there's a limit, but I think there's a great responsibility to make sure that you're always accurate, because at the end of the day, the BBC is seen as a media channel that people go out back to make sure that the news they're consuming from other outlets is accurate. You know, sometimes you'll read a news story on Twitter about something that's happened, and you'll go back to the BBC to check that everything you read was true. And so we have a great responsibility to make sure we're always accurate, impartial, and are telling the facts as they are.
I often feel as if the media is littered with news about Donald Trump, U.S. elections, etc. And I think it's very difficult for stories about Yemen and news about the Yemen to come out. Do you feel as if it is difficult, and how do you plan on tackling this?
I do think it's really depressing when you watch news bulletins, especially for someone like me who gets to travel to all these places, and I know there are so many really important stories that people should know about, that are more important than President Donald Trump's latest tweet, or, you know, and it's depressing when you see the focus elsewhere. But I'm also really lucky to work in an organization that, you know, really values important stories. And so I haven't had a problem with getting any of my pieces on air. You know, we do our best to make sure that you get like a wide range of stories in every news bulletin. So, you know, if the first 5 minutes are about Donald Trump, the next 5 minutes will be about a foreign story somewhere. And then the 5 minutes after that will be about something artistic. So our news bulletins are not heavy with just stories of war. And I think, you know, it's important for people to be exposed to everything that's going on around the world. You know, there's some good and there's some bad, but our job really is to keep everyone informed about everything that's going on.
How has your work personally impacted people in Yemen in a positive way?
I think so. You know, some of the stuff we've done has been really harrowing. A lot of my reporting has focused on the starvation in Yemen, and it's been really difficult for me even to kind of deal with some of the things I've seen on the ground in Yemen. But what's made it so much easier is how our audience react to the pieces and how they react to the images that we show to them. So for example, when my piece on the starving children first came out, the first piece I ever did on the starving children in Yemen first came out, the British public responded with outrage, and everyone was asking how they could help. So we were able to support charities working in Yemen, and we were able to advertise how you can donate. And, you know, within weeks we were able to raise millions in aid for Yemenis on the ground. And then I got to go and check on the children I'd filmed and see how they were doing and whether they'd received the aid. And seeing them do so much better, seeing how they'd received food, they were receiving support from all these different organizations, has got to be one of the highlights of my career.
So I'm sure you're not a stranger to the sight of death and poverty. I'm so sorry about that. How does that affect you?
It's hard. I don't think it ever gets old, you know. It's a really difficult part of the job. But it's also so important for us to show the reality of what's going on in the world around us. And, you know, for me, I think it's such a privilege and such an honor that people welcome me into their homes in these countries and share what is sometimes the most horrifying and difficult stories of their lives with us. You know, it's a great responsibility, and, you know, that's what we like to focus on. For me, the most important thing is to make sure that we make sure their stories go out to the world and that people hear their stories. And, you know, doing stuff like this, doing talks like I did today, is really rewarding and shows that we are doing that.